Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.
We've got a situation where from time to time, and we've now all seen these 3D classified videos of the Navy jets chasing these things. So you have a situation where from time to time military pilots chase these things in jets. Simultaneously, they are tracked on military radar system, and we don't know what they are.
Hello, this is Nick Pope, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, the UK's biggest paranormal network. And this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
You have to have the facts, and you can't tell the people.
Hello and welcome to another show. Thank you for that introduction, Nick. Right, today I've got another superstar of the paranormal for you. He's a very prolific writer, Nick Redfern. First thing I'd like to do is say thank you for the emails and comments that I've had coming in. Some very interesting comments. Some were just saying how much they enjoy the show. I've had nobody say they don't like the show yet, but there must be some out there. But anyway, I thought I'd read this one out. It's quite an interesting little story, which I think you might find interesting. This is from a person named Kai. I don't know his full name. It says, "Hi David, thank you for a very informative and entertaining talk show." Okay, well thank you for the kind comment, Kai. I try to do my best. Following your invitation, I'd like to share a rather interesting experience I had recently. I have had other strange experiences, but this one is the most striking. I was suffering from a constriction in the esophagus from time to time, which resulted in food getting stuck. It sounds nasty. The process of getting it unstuck and down to where it belonged was at times rather uncomfortable, I can imagine, if not painful. Fearing the worst, I went to see a specialist who conducted some tests. All were negative. The constriction persisted, and in my desperation I tried to call our ET friends for help. I have no experience in remote viewing or anything similar, but this is what I did. I imagined the variety of extraterrestrial craft, large saucers, small saucers, triangular craft, huge motherships in a variety of forms, etc. Then I envisaged a schematic depiction of the esophagus with a red blob pulsing to point out the location of the constriction and the letters H, E, L, P, also in red. Spelling help, of course. After doing this for a while, two vertical beams of light appeared in the middle of my lounge. The beams were suspended in mid-air, approximately 8 centimetres in length and approximately 3 centimetres wide. The light they emitted was white, with a slight orange tint at the edges. There was absolutely no possibility of the beams being a reflection of any object in my lounge. Shortly after I became aware of the beams, they disappeared, and so did the constriction of my esophagus. I'm not quite sure what to make of this experience, but I would like to believe that ET's actually lent me a helping hand. I'm curious to know what you make of my experience. Kind regards, Kai. Well, Kai, all I can say, it's a very interesting story. All I can say is I'm pleased that you're okay now and better. And we can only hope that it was ET help. I really can't say any more than that. I mean, it's a very interesting story, and as long as you're better, I think that's the important thing, isn't it? Let me know if you have any more experiences like that. I'd really be pleased to hear from you. Thank you for getting in touch. And of course, if anyone else has got any comments or stories they'd like to send in, please do. My email address is davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. That's David Young, 2QN, all one word, at yahoo.co.uk. I'll be pleased to hear anything from you, and perhaps I can read yours out too. Okay, right, today's guest is Nick Redfern, as I mentioned. As most people will probably know, he's a very prolific writer. He's got a new book out now called The Martians. He was on a sister program a little while ago on the Paranormal UK radio network. But on this show, he's going to be talking mostly, I think, about the Rendlesham Forest conspiracy, which was one of his previous books, probably about 2 or 3 books ago now, because that's when I actually booked him for the show. But since then, he's had about 3 more books out. So this should prove interesting anyway, because it is the 40th anniversary of the Rendlesham Forest incident. So, really, without further ado, I think I should invite Nick to come and speak to us. Hello, Nick. Welcome to the show.
Hey David, how's it going?
It's going absolutely fine, my friend, and hope things are going well over there. How's the weather over there?
I guess it's kind of like everywhere, just sort of being careful and going where you're going and what or not going, you know. So, but I'm lucky in the sense that, the job I do, with the books and whatever, I pretty much work at home, and I'm not doing any conferences, no more lectures, no more conferences, no more TV, mainly because, to go to them kind of places, you've got to fly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Last thing I want to do is get on a plane filled with infected people or give it a worse, or just as bad, me giving it to them, if I went down with it at some point.
Well, not only that, you don't, I don't know about you, how you feel about it. I'd hate to be sitting on a plane with wearing a mask, to be honest, as far as that goes. But,
Well, that's a good point as well, because, when I go, to get food in, that's enough for sort of like 20-25 minutes getting all your food in for the week. Never mind sitting on a plane for like 3.5 hours or something with a mask on.
Yeah.
I can do without all that.
Yeah. Well, especially if you came to the UK.
Right now,
as I say, especially if you came to the UK, you got to wear a mask for sort of like 10 or 12 hours, or maybe even 14 hours, because it's crazy, isn't it? But anyway, we don't want to talk to it. We get so much of all that. Let's not talk about all that.
Well, I don't mind. Whatever you want to talk about, it's fine.
I'll tell you what I would like to ask you. How is it you come to live in the US? How did you come about doing that?
Well, my girlfriend at the time was American, and we got married and in 2001, and I moved over in 2001, so that's 20 years ago now, which, when I think of it like that, it's a long time ago, I guess. And,
yeah.
It wasn't work or anything like that, it was because I got married, so...
Oh, right, so it's a bit of a personal question I shouldn't have asked, really, but...
No, I don't mind. No, it's fine with me, we've actually met at a conference, and she was there with the mom, and that's how we met.
Yeah.
And,
so you became an American citizen, basically, did you? Off the back of that?
No, I'm what's called a permanent resident.
Oh, I see, right.
It's a similar situation.
Yeah. Can you apply for citizenship? Or you're not sort of bothered?
Well, yes, you can. You can be, some people stay as residents, some people stay as citizens, and then, of course, you've got other people who are here maybe, on a work permit, that kind of thing. So there's actually several different categories, of your positions.
Yeah. I mean, I a few years back, I had the chance of becoming, I was offered a job over there, basically, because I used to come over there quite a bit for working on the AC-130s, because I used to go to Herbert Field in Pensacola, or just outside of Pensacola. And, but anyway, I gave that a lot of thought, but if they'd have asked me sort of like 20 years before, I might have sort of said yes, but it was sort of too late in the day in my life, really, to start thinking about moving to the States, but so I suppose I would have been in the same position, but...
Well, yeah, you can't just sort of, march into the country and say I want to stay. You have to.
I know.
You've got to be able to, and also, regardless of your position, you have to be able to prove that you can, financially look after yourself, and if you've got a family as well. You can't just sort of, like I said, you can't just roll in and say, I want to live here, etc., etc.
No.
So it doesn't work like that, but which isn't a bad thing, if you're going to come in the country, so
yeah, I suppose off the back of a job offer, you're all right that way as well, but
Well, but I guess from my perspective, I started to do my first book in 1995. And so, my first 3 books were out for 5 years. My first book came out in 97.
Was that
the third one in England?
Am I correct? Was that a covert agenda? Is that right?
Yeah, that one came out in 97, so that's like 23 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was just basically a situation that from that period onwards, sort of 95, that I was already sort of stabilised in the UK, working from home. So it wasn't really, a jump, to move over here, because I'd already had sort of 3 or 4 years, sort of working as a writer. So it wasn't like a new country and a new job. The job was exactly the same, but it was just in a different country.
Yeah. And I have to say, I think you're probably one of the most prolific writers in the supernatural UFO world that I think I can think of, really. I don't know how you do it.
Well, I often get asked that question, how do you do it? Well, what I do, I never work weekends, I never work evenings, and I just work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I keep it like job hours, what I call them, and I wouldn't want people to think it's just a job, because it isn't. I've still got like the excitement and the passion for it all that I did, when I was 15, 20, that kind of thing. But for me, I think if I was sort of doing it, I don't know, 24/7, I'd be just fried,
Yeah, you burn yourself out, yeah.
Yeah, and when you burn yourself out, you don't do your best work. So for that reason, I get up, have breakfast, work 9 to 5, then at 5 o'clock, I put the laptop into sleep mode, and I don't touch the laptop till the next morning. Then on a Friday, I usually finish about 4 o'clock, and the laptop stays in sleep mode till Monday morning.
Right.
I just don't touch it, and I don't check email throughout that period, and I'll check Facebook if there's work stuff that I need to deal with. But other than that, I just don't go online.
You try to stay away from it. I don't blame you. Now, isn't it a bit like songwriting? Don't you suddenly get an idea and think, oh, I should have had that? And aren't you tempted sometimes to then get your laptop out, or do you just make notes of things?
No, that's actually, I guess it's a bit of both. I'm always sort of thinking of new ideas, but sometimes for sure there's going to be enough material to be able to do a book, but then other times, it's more along the lines of, well, you really got to sort of dig into this because it's a really cool story, but it might take sort of a year to do all the research and then another 6 or 7 months to do the writing. So it is a bit of everything, kind of like being in a band, and kind of also with the parallels with conferences and lectures, you write the book and then, you hit the road to promote the book, just like, a band. New songs out, and they go and promote the new songs. So there are actually a lot of very similar parallels, really. And
yes, a bit like Nick Redfern on tour, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it was until most of the conferences here were just slashed and cancelled because of the virus. And I mean, in saying that, I mean, like over here, there's spikes. There are big spikes, and one of the reasons is because there are sort of big groups of people still around. For example, about 2 months ago, there was a Bigfoot conference up north where there was, I think, about 1,000 people. So it wasn't. It's not like people are staying away, And then there was a conference not too far from me just recently where there's a couple of hundred, and so it's really how people want to respond to it all. I suppose for me, I think the best thing for me to do is to sort of stay inside.
Yeah. It does come down to personal choice, doesn't it? But I think a lot of people feel they just want to get on with their lives rather than sort of living in fear and tucking themselves away. I think that's kind of the way I look at it. But
well, yeah, I think a lot of people have sort of, at first, everybody was kind of like peeking around the shelves, in the supermarket, not getting too close to people. But now, I think a lot of people have just sort of, put their mask on and they're just going to, hope for the best because they're just sick of being inside, So I think that's part of it. I mean, I don't see people over here sort of living in fear, but I do see a lot of people who are sort of just kind of depressed and what's going to happen kind of thing,
Yeah. And of course you've got the American election going on. Now when this goes out, obviously the elections will be over, which is next week. But actually, as we're talking now, the election is kind of really in its last throes, isn't it? All the votes are probably just about in now. Yeah. So so what is your prediction? And remember, what is your prediction as to who's going to win?
I honestly don't know. I mean, you look at some of the figures and the polls and things like that, and, then you'll have one channel will tell you this, and another channel will tell you that, and,
I know,
you don't really know, which one it's going to be, but, it's one of those situations where I just don't know, because I think they keep saying it's close to the wire, and other companies, and channels have said, it's high for this one or it's high for that one, but
I know exactly what to say.
I don't know, but
I just wanted to put you on the spot because when this show goes out next week, we'll already know. So.
Well, we will know by then. We'll be talking in the past right now, but I mean, I've always been a Democrat, and Labour in the UK,
right?
And we'll just sort of see what happens. So.
Yeah, as I say, we'll know when this is out anyway, so we won't go down that road too much. Anyway, Nick, we actually arranged this show for when your Rendlesham Forest conspiracy book came out. Now, of course, you've had a couple more books out since then, and you were on this network with talking about your last book, your recent book, the Martians, recently. So, can we go back to the Rendlesham Forest conspiracy, if you can cast your mind back, and what led you to write that book? I know you've been interested in the Rendlesham Forest thing for years.
Well, the main reason was because over the years, there've been rumours, of Rendlesham being sort of a top secret experiment rather than a UFO event, and what always intrigued me and puzzled me as well was that a lot of people in ufology, they knew about these rumours, but most people didn't touch it. But you'd see snippets in that book. I mean, for example, in two, I think, of Jenny Randall's books, Sky Crash, that she did with Dot Street
and Brenda
Butler. That talks about, alternative scenarios, as did her follow-up book from Out the Blue, and then a third one in Georgina Bruni's book, You Can't Tell the People. There's an entire section on how it could have been a secret experiment. But it was one of these situations where, it was like the elephant in the room. Nobody really wanted to talk about it. And my view was that nobody's ever touched the angle of the secret experiment theory to a full-length book degree. It really was like a paragraph here or 2 pages in this book, 5 pages in this book, and that's it. And I could never really understand why people steered away from it. Well, actually, I know one of the reasons, and we can get to that. The primary reason, I think, was because, particularly for the UFO research community, they didn't want to hear that. They wanted tales of exciting conspiracies and aliens and UFOs beaming down or whatever. So in other words, it's the I want to believe scenario, Vox Mulder, I want to believe. That's part of it. And another part as well, and I know this because I see a lot behind the scenes, conferences and lectures, and for a lot of conference organisers themselves, I don't sort of make any bones of saying that a lot of conference organisers are in it solely just for money, and for that reason, they don't want Nick coming to their conferences and, sort of blowing out the window this story or that one and replacing it with this one. And that really is what a lot of it comes down to. It's all about, well, not all about, but for certain researchers and conference organisers who I won't name, but who I know, they just do it for, for the money, et cetera, and they want to make sure that the train keeps going down the track, that kind of situation. Now, what I need to say, obviously, is that, I earn my living from writing books and, lectures and conferences and TV things and stuff like that. But, when people say to me, well, you do it for the money, I don't, because if I was like some sort of cynical type person, which I'm not, a manipulative, cynical person, I wouldn't have written this book, because, a book saying that aliens didn't land at Rendlesham Forest is not going to sell a lot of copies. A book saying that aliens absolutely landed at Rendlesham Forest is going to play a lot, earn a lot of money for the author. So if I was in it for money, I'd hardly be writing a book saying Rendlesham or Roswell didn't involve aliens, but I can only say it as as I see it, and vice versa. And as I said, if I wanted to, if this was all money based, I wouldn't be writing a book saying aliens didn't land. Because a book like that isn't going to sell many copies, and it didn't. But
really? I thought he actually would have done well, Nick.
No.
He hasn't?
No, but I knew that, though, because, most people just didn't want to hear it. I mean, I couldn't tell you the number of people who said to me, that they thought it was a viable scenario. Well, I don't know, I should say, I don't know how many, sort of agreed with me, but I know at least about 60 or 70 people contacted me to say they thought it was either the answer or it was a viable scenario. I had at least 30 or 40 who basically said they didn't believe it, but when I asked them, well, have you read the book? No. So, you're up against that angle. Whether, you, me, or whoever else believes in this scenario or this scenario for Rendlesham, the fact is, if you're going to make a controversial statement or write a book, at least, the person who's criticising you should at least read the thing, because how can they put up a viable answer to me if they're not even going to read it, it's pointless.
Yeah.
It's like people like that are just stupid.
Yeah.
So, but I'm now, I've always said, people have said to me, well, if all the other scenarios are actually cover stories, how do you know that your story isn't a cover story? And, I have to admit, I cannot say for sure that I was not sort of duped, I don't think I was, and I think the story that I present in the book is sort of cohesive, and it comes together, it's plausible, and it answers some of the weirder and stranger scenarios that doesn't necessarily relate directly to an ET angle.
Yeah.
But ufology is a funny game,
Oh, yeah.
It's like, if you're saying what, certain people in the field want to hear, you're the greatest friend, If you dare to say, this, fantastic case that everybody's loved for 30 years, and you suddenly say something else, it's like your worst enemy. But the way I look at that, I mean, I don't care, I've got thick skin, and somebody wants to scream at me, I'll shout back.
Yeah, sure.
And because that's how it has to be. You have to support yourself and and say why you think this and why you think you're right, and et cetera, et cetera. But in saying all of that, if you write a book like this, and I've done 2 or 3 like this where I've sort of, really kind of walked away from the conventional stories, then you realise how quickly people change, because it's all driven by emotion, and I mean, I wouldn't want to sound like a robot.
No, I understand.
What I mean is that if you're going to look into this, just go where the answers are. Don't go where you want the answers to go. So.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you do believe we've been visited by alien craft, I would have thought, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, this is where it gets a little bit sort of controversial. Well, not so much controversial, more complicated. Here's where it gets, for me, even me, a little bit complicated at times. My view is that there's a genuine UFO phenomenon. Now, whether it's extraterrestrial, interdimensional, multidimensional, I have no idea what they are. But there is a genuine phenomenon that is not human. It's from somewhere else. But I don't know if it's extraterrestrials in the literal term, or aliens in the sense that they're not from here.
Yeah.
But they are real. But in saying that, I think at some point, probably in the 50s and 60s, and more so in the 70s, I think government agencies realized that they could use this genuine UFO phenomenon and kind of hijack it as a means to use for different reasons as well. Like, for example, alien abductions. I do believe alien abductions are genuine, but there's a number of cases I've investigated which I think were actually fabricated abductions, and it was basically a case of government agencies testing new and radical mind control technology, and the best way to hide what you're doing is to put it under the camouflage of something else. So you hide this new program under a UFO banner. And I think that's what's happened. There's a real phenomenon, but government agencies have realised, hey, we can use this as a camouflage to hide this and hide that. And, when we test flying these new aircraft we've got, we can say it's drones or it's little green men, that kind of thing. So I think there is a real phenomenon, but it's also a phenomenon that has been used as a tool to plan other things, and other programs, and see how people react if they actually see what they think is a UFO when it may not be.
Yeah.
You can judge how people would respond, and that's kind of the scenario in the book, that we're talking about sophisticated holograms, things like that, and sitting back and seeing how the soldiers in the woods respond, and if they respond like hysteria, panic, down on the hands and knees crying or whatever, then you could actually gauge how the enemy might respond on the battlefield. But how are you going to do that to find out? Well, you use it in an area of woods on a night time over the Christmas period when there aren't many people around, and then just see what the response is. And if the response is that the guys in the woods sort of panicked and didn't know what to do, that demonstrates how, wow, we could really use this. You know, if we go to war with another nation, we can screw with their minds, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you know, the book Left at Eastgate, now that went right down the sensationalism route, didn't it, with the aliens landing and everything, and of course, that particular yarn has actually been blown completely out of the water, and the book was actually removed from sale.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point, did you not support that? I mean, I think we've all, myself, I'll admit that I was actually taken in by that book myself, and I believed it all until, you know, it was looked into and investigated, and really, the whole story just didn't hold up, because there were so many holes in it. Did you believe that story once upon a time?
Well, yeah, I mean, I met Larry Warren and Peter Robbins for the first time back in '97 when I was still in the UK, and Larry and Peter were in the UK. They were doing a up and down the country sort of book tour.
Yeah,
you know,
that was their tour, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was their book, and you know, it's a well-written book and it's a well-written story, you know. Now, Peter, a couple of years ago, you know, sort of pushed for the book to be taken off the shelves, and it was, you know, I mean, when they say it's taken off the shelves, you know, it's still available because there are numerous bookstores around the country that, you know, would still have books, you know, like used bookstores. And,
oh yeah, sure. There's still sort of thousands out there, or at least hundreds out there, yeah, but available.
Yeah. But when it comes to that book, you know, and the story, the problem is not so much, you know, the overall thing, but the issue of, you know, by Larry Warren's own admission, you know, there's this angle of, you know, him having been meddled with, you know, his mind meddled with. Now, you know, some people have said, well, you know, that's just, you know, part of the story. But the fact is that, you know, Charles Holt, at the time was Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, in December 1980, when all this went down, at that particular time, you know, we're talking about a situation and, you know, the deputy base commander, well, quite early on, Holt himself actually said, even though he didn't buy into Larry's story, he actually didn't also think it was all just lying, because Holt actually said that he felt that somehow Larry's mind had been meddled with. Now, just last year, about, or was it about 18 months ago now, something like that, I gave a lecture at a conference down in South Texas. It's a yearly one, and the conference, it's called the Out of This World Conference, and down South Texas towards Mexico. And I speak there about every other year, something like that. And Charles Holt was one of the speakers as well.
Right.
And we, you know, we sort of all hung out in the bar as you do at these events, you know, and have a good time. And So what happened was that, we got chatting, and Holt told me that to this day, he doesn't buy Larry's story, but, just 18 months ago, or roughly when it was, we did the conference, Holt still said that he felt in some way Larry's mind had been messed with, kind of almost like a modern or a more modern version of something like MK Ultra. So where I kind of differ with a lot of people who just threw Larry's story out, the fact that one of the key figures, in the entire case, Lieutenant Colonel Holt, as he was at that time, somebody of that caliber and one of the key figures, has spoken about, well, maybe his mind was played with. And I find that intriguing because if Larry's mind was, meddled to a significant degree, then you're in that precarious situation where you're not necessarily lying, but you have no real understanding of what was the reality of what happened with you and what didn't. Like, for example, there's the famous part in there about Larry seeing these little creatures. Well, if your mind has been meddled with, how would you actually know if that part of the incident or the incidents was a real part of it, or your mind had been playing with and inserted, and you actually, so you wouldn't be lying, you would legitimately not actually know what was the truth and what wasn't. And I think that's a scenario, pre all of this, Larry and Peter were just, sort of promoting their book, etc. After that, it all became, Larry's an outright liar, and it was like black and white. It went from people like the book, everybody's buying it, and then suddenly it's taken off the shelves and Larry's a liar. But when you look at the subtleties, if his mind was really messed with, and, to where Larry isn't sure himself, what the truth was, well, that in itself is part of the story,
Yeah. I think what also adds to that is that Peter really felt as if he was really taken in as well, didn't he? Because I think right from the start he was actually questioning Larry Warren's story, but he kind of went along with it. And I think what's the big undoing of that was that Larry Warren was found to be lying in several other areas of like his duty and everything, and it kind of took the whole story apart, didn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, you can still get the book, but, I don't know sort of the extent, to which it's available. But again, it's one of these situations where, there's so many sides to this, and that's honestly not me sitting on the fence. For me, we have to look at every aspect of it, not just the black and white angle of he's a liar, no, he's not a liar, etc., etc., etc. To me, it's far more deeper than that, and more sort of subtle than that, and that kind of situation about, when people, like, I'll give you a good example, like a genuine, real situation, like in the early 60s, and I talk about this in the book, when, a number of UK military personnel were exposed to LSD in 1964 in woods and forested area not too far from Porton Down, and they were all dosed with LSD, and some of them had, highly graphic hallucinations in English woods. And you think about Rendlesham, well, that's a bunch of guys in English woods, and in relation to the Porton Down LSD thing, they were seeing all sorts of weird things. Now, you ask those guys today, if you ask them to write their story, they could do that. But would it actually be the truth?
Yeah. Yeah.
It wouldn't be lying. And I think there's more to it, because it would be very easy for Holt to say that Larry was a liar, but Holt didn't say that. Holt said that Larry was meddled with, and he used the word meddled.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but Chuck's a good friend of mine. He's actually stayed here a few times, and he still, to this day, says he doesn't know what it was they saw on that third night when he was involved, of course. Well, if it was the third night, because there's really some questions there, even, isn't there? If it was the first, I know it wasn't the first, but either the second or the third night, because the second night or the second incident is still a bit of a misty figure, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, everything about Rendlesham is weird, you know. I mean, a lot of people, even in ufology, you know, a lot of people don't know or realise that going back to the 1930s to pretty much to the late 80s, you know, the whole area was a hotspot for secret classified experiments.
Oh, yeah. Cobra Mist and everything, yeah.
Yeah, well, there was, back in the 30s, there was the Tizard Committee, which is one of the earliest places where radar was developed in the 1930s. Then in the 1940s, you've got the mysterious story of Shingle Street, where allegedly there was an attempt to invade the UK late one night from the East Coast, and reportedly a number of the German personnel were all sort of fried and set on fire by some sort of technology. And then, as you said, Cobra Mist, which was another top-secret radar-based program. Now, the interesting thing about those three projects, the Tizard Committee, and then the Shingle Street situation, Cobra Mist, and various other programs, a lot of people don't know that all of those projects were all within or less than 10 miles from Rendlesham Forest. So, you know, when you've got somewhere like Rendlesham Forest 7-8 miles away from some of the most significant and top secret programs that were ran from the 30s onward, you know, they turned out to occur or to have been put into place less than 10 miles from the forest. So, you know, when I look at it like that, you know, I can't see it as just a coincidental situation. I think we're just seeing in 1980 the latest kind of experiment based on the fact that, you know, so many previous ones had sort of been undertaken successfully.
Now, when you spoke to Chuck or Colonel Holt, did you discuss that with him? I mean, and because I know when I've spoken to him about it, he says he doesn't know what it was. He still thinks it was something extraterrestrial or interdimensional or something like that. He doesn't seem to think that it was a military experiment. You know, I don't know.
No, he does. You're right.
Yeah, do you agree? I mean, I don't know how deep the conversation was you had with him.
Oh no, we were all just hanging out. I mean, I can't say it was like you know, some deep, you know, sort of situation. I mean, there was sort of 70 or 80 people, you know, all hanging out, knocking back the beer and whatever, you know, and having a good time.
Yeah.
He was very kind of relaxed, you know, and
oh no, yeah, he likes a couple of beers, I know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, for me, conferences are there to sort of learn information and, you know, find the latest information, but also at the end of the day, you know, well, through the day as well, you know, have a good time.
Yeah.
You know, and see your friends who you haven't seen for the last 6 months or 2 years or whatever. And, you know, as I said that, you know, in 2001, you know, that's why I, you know, met my wife at the time.
Yeah.
Was because, you know, we met at a conference and, she was there with her mom and, it was just pure, fate, I guess, you know. So, yeah, to get back to the point, though, you know, it wasn't like, you know, we're having like a sit-down interview, Q&A, we were all just chatting. But I think Holt, I think, does sort of still go with the UFO angle. However, I think he kind of views Larry's part of it slightly separate,
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think obviously when you were talking to him, I think that was kind of around about the time, maybe a little bit before that, when that whole story seemed to have fell apart, didn't it? And Larry's story just didn't.
Yeah, it would have been about then.
Didn't hold up at all. And of course, Richard D. Hall has recently, actually last Christmas, took the story apart as well. And also, I don't know if you're aware, but Jim Penniston doesn't think much of your book either, or your rendition of it.
Oh, I know.
I don't know if you.
I had a number of debates with him on Facebook. When the book came out back in May. I think for probably about 8 or 9 days, every morning I'd come down and there'd be like, maybe 45 posts in this, in this message and in this post of it, and then there might be like sort of 80 comments in this one, and I'd have to go through all these, which I didn't mind, that's what I'm there, and it's good to get good debate. But no, you're right. Jim doesn't agree with the story at all. And what I've said is this: he was there and I wasn't. I was still at school. When that happened. I wasn't even old enough to like go to sixth form or anything. I was just a kid when that happened, and. So I didn't know anything about it. But what I would say, is that, yes, Penniston was there. There's no doubt about that. And I say in the book that the 3 most important people in the story are Penniston, Burroughs, and Holt. I put that in the book. I said they are the 3 most important ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
My view, though, is that if there's multiple issues relative to, hallucinogens and drugs and all sorts of different things, then, then it comes down to this issue: can you trust your own mind? This has nothing to do with anybody being lying. I don't believe anybody in this story. I certainly don't believe Holt. Penniston, Burroughs, I don't believe they have lied in any fashion at all. I think they have absolutely 100% told their story accurate as they saw it. Now, the one thing that a lot of people overlook or maybe don't know is that unlike so many other UFO events, this one is sort of shrouded and saturated in issues relative to mind-altering drugs. For example, Penniston was put under sodium pentothal or a similar kind of truth gov, and you've got Holt, who told me and told other people that Larry's mind had been played with, and then I'm sure you know the stories about how a team supposedly came down from Porton Down, and was sort of meddling around in the woods as well.
Oh, is that the SAS story? Yes, is that the SAS story you mean?
No, this is a team of scientists that came from Porton Down. Yeah, a team of scientists came to Porton Down reportedly the day before or the night before the first event. So, throughout this story, you've got this thread of drugs and hallucinogenics, and you don't see that in many cases. So again, you've got sort of a unique aspect to this story, which doesn't turn up in Roswell or doesn't turn up in this or that, but it does in Rendlesham, and of course you've got the, I don't know if you know the story of the alleged planned evacuation of one of the close prisons in the area. which is, well, that prison is only like 6 miles from Rendlesham Forest, and it's called Hollesley Bay, and it's actually a prison for young offenders, kids who've stolen cars, that kind of thing, who aren't sort of, a major danger, unless they hit someone, obviously, but, they're not sort of major criminals. They're sort of, young offenders, that kind of thing. Now, the one theory is that the reason why that there was going to be an evacuation was because on one of the nights, whoever was running the experiment was going to release hallucinogens in the woods and see what effect this would have on the guys. Unfortunately, the weather's changed, and the direction where the wind was blowing was towards the prison. Now, that doesn't prove anything, but it does demonstrate a plausible scenario where you've got scientists from Porton Down bringing hallucinogens. Why on earth would you, evacuate people from a prison? I mean, arguably, if it was just a UFO event, why not just leave them in the prison or locked up, because that would be the best place for them, Why unleash them onto the streets? But, if there's a concern that a bunch of prisoners were going to be exposed as well, inadvertently, well, then you could possibly see why that could all happen. So again, there's so many things going on in relation to Rendlesham that don't seem to fall into a regular situation of a UFO event. But you see, again, like I said, these threads of drugs, of mind alteration, and, where it all goes, I don't know, but what I would say is that the primary angle of all this story was like, using sort of hallucinogens, but primarily, when you're sort of creating things in the human eye that actually aren't there. We sort of things like holograms, perceived to look like this or perceived to look like that. And that story of Rendlesham being in a secret experiment using holograms actually goes back to the 1980s and to a US researcher named Ray Boucher, and he was one of the first researchers to look into the case, and he actually contacted his I forget if it was his representative or his congressman, I think, and so he pushed and pushed, and he was eventually, he did what he could, Ray Boucher did what he could, and he actually got a lot done, a lot of research, and dug into the stories, found a lot of stories. He was actually the first person to hear of the Porton Down story, and he actually got that back in 1983. That's how far back that Porton Down story goes. But on top of that, he was also the first one who was given the story that it was holograms rather than aliens and UFOs. Jenny Randalls was given the same story, and Georgina Bruni was given a huge amount of material on that angle as well. So, it wasn't just me talking about that. The only difference is I was the only one who wrote a full-length book on it, but a lot of people were surprised when I told them that in Georgina's book, there's like 5 or 6 pages of it.
Yeah, there is.
Nick Pope's book. Yeah, Nick Pope's got like 6 or 7, maybe more pages in his book on that angle. So everybody's addressed it, but
but not as fully as you have.
People haven't.
Yeah, it's a shame, Georgina.
Yeah, but I mean, nobody else has done a full-length book, and but there's going to be some, not coming from me, but there are going to be some interesting revelations coming towards the end of the year in relation to all of this as well.
Oh, right. Well, what, is it something you can't say anything about?
Yep.
Right, okay.
But it's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with me, though.
Right.
But it will sort of provoke all the controversy again.
Oh, I think it's not the long-awaited film, is it?
sir?
It's not the long-awaited film that's taken longer than Cleopatra to hit the screens, is it?
Oh no, nothing to do with films. No.
No,
but I'm sure, you know, just for the fact that it's, you know, it's coming up to the 40th anniversary.
Yes, yeah.
You know, I think, you know, there's going to be a huge amount of debate anyway. And actually, that was the reason why, you know, I decided to put my book out in May, because what I didn't want was to be seen as jumping on the bandwagon for the 40th anniversary.
Yeah.
I mean, what I said back in May, there's nothing else I can say now. But I felt that if I was to do that, you know, do it beforehand, people may not agree with me. A lot of people didn't, and a lot of people did, you know.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that demonstrating, you know, you're avoiding some sort of anniversary hysteria, I think is a good way to do it, because it demonstrates you don't have an agenda.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's certainly a very interesting book. I mean, I've got it. I can't say. I mean, because I'm friends with Colonel Holt, Chuck, and he's told me he can't. He still doesn't know what it was, but he still believes it was something extraterrestrial. I kind of feel, because I'm so close to that, I can't really sort of think that it was something, an experiment. It's very hard to sort of accept it, you know, but I can actually see where you're coming from, and I can accept that obviously something strange has happened that nobody can explain. But and also, Jim Penniston's book is so detailed as well, with you know, who said what, when, and everything. I don't know if you've read Jim's book.
Yes, I have, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the opinion, it's actually very, very detailed, isn't it? And, you know, it seems to sort of address everything that everyone's said over the years. And obviously he's still convinced that he touched the craft in the woods on the first night. Apparently John Burroughs doesn't remember much of anything. Still.
Well, again, you know, you've got this issue of, you know, people's minds, that they can't remember this, they can't remember that, you know, a portion here's gone, that kind of thing. Now, you know, you could make a case, well, this is similar to missing time with abductions, you know, and it could be. You know, but I think the most important thing is that, you know, we keep digging, and you know, and because it's important, because if it's proved that aliens really did land at Rendlesham, then that would be like one of the most amazing things ever, and the entire UFO research community could stand up and say, we got it right.
Yeah.
On the other hand, though, if it turns out that it's a, you know, a highly advanced, sophisticated experiment to test and, you know, personnel and see how their minds, you know, are sort of played with or whatever, if that's the answer, then ufology is going to have the task of looking at, well, which are the real UFO events and which are the ones that have been used, like in the form of a secret experiment to test new technologies, and we can wipe it all off as, oh, just little green men, don't worry about it, you know. So either way, the answer is going to be a profound one for ufology if we prove it, and that's the big problem, you know. And this is kind of like Roswell, you know, we've got a lot of testimonial, we've got a data, etc., but after 73 years now, we still don't have evidence. And what that means is that we'll just keep having more and more books written on the subject. And that's the same with Rendlesham. You know, more and more books. And I'm not complaining about that, because, you know, I write books.
Sure. And documentaries and films and things, Yeah,
but in saying that, you know, it's a situation where we can only go on so long just recycling old stuff. And we can only go so far in terms of the data we've got. Somehow, you know, if to find the answers for Rendlesham, we literally have to do that. We have to find the answers, because all we'll have otherwise is just debate. A debate can be good, but not when it's the same old debates going on for 50 years, where somebody says, well, I think MJ12 documents, are real. No, they're garbage, that kind of thing. You can only go so far, and we need to find another way to get the answers to Rendlesham. Or in a lot of these cases, we need an alternative, unforeseen way to get the answers, because we've saturated the regular approach, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's where your book is important, because I think it is important to cover that aspect of it. I wouldn't back away from that at all. I think all
no need to creep.
Yeah, no, I think all aspects of that. No, it is. No, I do.
No, I'm just making a joke when I said you don't need to creep.
No, I do. I do honestly feel that way. I think all aspects should be looked at. I really do think that, and I think it's the only fair way of looking at stuff. I mean, it's silly hiding something away and say, oh no, it definitely wasn't that. No, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, anyone knows me. I like I like the truth of anything, even if it's something that I don't, that's going to be disappointing to me. I was actually disappointed to find out that basically everything in Left at Eastgate was, well, I won't say everything, but most of in Left at Eastgate was kind of lies and deceit. And I, for one, will not ever believe that anything landed in Capel Green and aliens were there. But I'm open to the suggestion that a craft landed in Rendlesham Forest and Jim Penniston touched the craft. I still kind of, go with that. Or maybe that, I don't know. If it was an experiment, then maybe it was a military experiment. I think it's going to be one of those things that's never going to be answered fully, and you probably agree with that.
Well, I mean, it will sort of continue, being a mystery if we don't find another alternative way to get the answers. And I just honestly don't know what the answer, I don't know what the way is to get the answer, and that's one of the big problems that we've got, is how do we get beyond the testimony, the theories, etc., etc. It's kind of like just hitting a brick wall, because where do you go when you've interviewed everybody? And, unlike Roswell, just about everybody almost is still alive, from Rendlesham, which is good. But when you've interviewed them as many times as you can, and we've got the full story, then we got to try and find the evidence. Now, for me, I guess the evidence would be whatever it was, an experiment or a UFO event. I think both of us would agree that there must be huge amounts of documentation on this somewhere. If it was a UFO event, there would be, files talking about what it was, or what it wasn't, what were these things, and trying to understand it. And if it was an experiment, there would still be huge amounts of documentation looking at how the experiment worked or didn't to their satisfaction. But the problem is getting that documentation. What we've got, if you think about it, 40 years later, what have we really got in terms of documentation? We've got the Holt memo, we've got the material that's surfaced from the office that Nick Pope worked in, which really didn't have anything, any great degree of anything at all, really. What we need is the Rendlesham file, so to speak, whatever that might be. And I think that's the only way to get the answer, is to find something that is the next step. You can only go so far, and I think. Well, then again, who knows what, as I said, I know one controversial thing is going to surface towards the end of the year. There could be somebody else. I'm not sort of saying this now, teasing people, but because I don't know anything, but on everything else. But what I would say is that maybe somebody will come straight out of the shadows, on December the 26th or whatever, and say, hey, here it all is, and we'll all be sort of gobsmacked, you know.
Yeah.
That could happen. That could actually happen. And if I'm right, I'll say I was right. And if I was wrong, I'll say, yeah, I got sort of used.
Yeah.
So, because, you know, you have to look at it from every angle, not just the angle you think, wow, that's cool, you know, and that one's shit, you know.
Yeah.
So...
So I'll edit that word out in a minute. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
No, I'll tell you what was most convincing to me when Colonel Holt said, because he didn't think it was a UFO when he heard the UFO story himself, and when it happened on the third night or the second event or wherever it was, he was going to go out and sort of poo-poo it all and say, let's go and sort this out and all this rubbish, and then they saw something themselves. That's kind of what where I get in on this, because he obviously saw something that he thought was weird. Obviously it wasn't aliens landing in Cape of Green or anything like that, but because all they saw was lights in the sky, flying across the sky. And there's also the radar evidence, isn't there? I mean, how do you account for that?
In what sense?
Well, there was radar evidence coming over. Things were seen on radar as well.
Mm-hmm.
On those particular nights.
Yeah, and in the book, I see what you mean. Yeah. I mean, some people have said, well, this is evidence of something in the skies, but I've also got like a half a page to a page in the book that talks about how fake radar images can be literally, you know, sort of show up on a screen. You know, there's an entire section in the book on that as to how to, you know, distort screens so, you know, you'll get images on the radar screen that are not there. You know, and that goes back to the 60s, and it was done first by a guy named Gene Poteat, P-O-T-E-A-T. If you Google Gene Poteat with a G, and then radar, you'll see how as far back as the 60s he came out with a way to freak the Russians out by meddling with their radar screens and make it look like, you know, that we got some sort of fantastic technologies, you know, flying at all super speeds and everything else, when it was nothing. There was nothing there at all other than fake images.
Yeah, okay, well, you've answered that. That's yeah. Okay, yeah.
I mean, one of the things I would sort of say to you when people have said to me, you know, that what do I think is the most important part of the story to sort of make a case that it was an experiment? I don't know if you got the book in front of you, but if you go to page 43, which is under the heading of Like a Rain of Sparks, you'll see how, you know, I sort of make a parallel between an experiment that occurred back in 1965 and the data that's actually in the Holt memo about these beams of light coming down and up and down, etc. And if you look on that part, as I said, that begins Like a Rain of Sparks, and if you read the next 3 or 4 pages after that, you'll see how astonishingly similar what Colonel Holt saw versus what is in that 1965 document about using ball lightning and guiding it with laser beams. And it actually sounds I'm not just saying that, it sounds really similar to what Holt described in that memo.
Ooh, yeah, interesting. No, I haven't actually got the book in front of me. In fact, I'm on the verge of moving, you see, and my book's actually packed. And because of all this lockdown that's going on, I can't get access to anything now because it's all in boxes behind me. So, unfortunately. But, so I'm actually talking a bit from memory here. But, yeah, no, it is an interesting book, and I would recommend anyone listening to this to actually get it, actually, because it is a very interesting book. But anyway, let's go away from the Rendlesham thing now, because we've sort of No, I think, in fact, I mean, you might be interested to know that I'm hoping to get Colonel Holt back on the show at the end of the year, with a 40th anniversary special. So no doubt we'll be talking about your book if we can, if I can, as long as I can get him on.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know, or I'll try. Yeah, let me know when it is, and I'll listen.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll make sure you get a copy of it anyway. But
oh, cool. Thanks.
Anyway, let's go away from Rendlesham now. You've got, I mean, honestly, the amount of books that you get out, it just amazes me, because you've got a book. Your latest book now is The Martians. Which you, as I say, you were on another show recently on this same network. So, anyone wants to listen to that? It's, I think you covered that book quite a lot on that. But you've also done before that things like Monsters of the Deep and Bloodlines of the Gods and the Bigfoot book. Now, what's your feelings on Bigfoot?
Well, that's my other big interest, is cryptozoology, the study of unknown animals.
That's why I'm asking you, I know.
Well, most researchers in the Bigfoot field sort of take the view that, the Bigfoot creatures, if they exist, which I think they do believe, that they do exist, in my view, yes, they're animals, they're creatures, but I don't think they're just sort of a North American equivalent of an African gorilla. I don't think they are, because there's some really weird cases on record where people have seen these things kind of vanish in a flash of light. People have seen them sort of glistening with almost like these little, almost like Christmas tree lights flickering around them. And there's a lot of weird stuff like this, so where they've been around sort of these strange lights, they vanish, we never catch one. The evidence is also always kind of, well, it could go this way, it could go that way. We never get contrary to what people have said, there is no Bigfoot DNA. There isn't, there's nothing. Now, my view is that in a country the size of the US, with more than 300 million people, and where Bigfoot, the creatures, not just one, that the creatures have been seen all across the country, and they're like 7 to 8 feet tall, and we can't even catch one of them. I mean, I could understand if Bigfoot was the size of like a mouse, that you would never catch them, or you probably wouldn't. But I mean, seeing these things all across the country, and they're giants, they're not just tall, they're giants, and we cannot catch one, cannot kill one, they never get hit by cars, and they've got this sort of typical here 1 minute or here 1 second, gone the next second. So I think there's something really weird about Bigfoot. I think there's more of a paranormal aspect to it, and kind of like maybe like a multi-dimensional angle, because that's the only way I can really think of how you could have, Bigfoot creatures from one side of, the west side of the United States to the east coast, the north and south, and you can have sightings everywhere, and, they're looming over you at 8 feet. And we don't get one. Yeah. I'm kind of repeating, but it is an important factor. No other animal acts like that. Most people in the US, and certainly I've never seen, like a mountain lion in the wild or a grizzly bear. But some people do. But now and again, grizzly bears and mountain lions get hit by vehicles, and they do get killed. Bigfoot never dies, and at least in the sense it's not the body's never found, put it that way. So I think there's far more going on, and I think the same applies to, like with the Loch Ness Monster. The idea, there's multiple reasons why they're not plesiosaurs. One main reason is that plesiosaurs lived in the oceans, which were the oceans are salt water, Loch Ness is fresh water. And plesiosaurs were marine reptiles, which means, like crocodiles, they have to surface for oxygen about every sort of 15, 20 minutes. So if you've got a colony of, let's say, 15 plesiosaurs in Loch Ness, and each of those 15 are surfacing sort of every 15 minutes. We'd be seeing them coming up out of the water all the time. So they're clearly not plesiosaurs. But what's interesting is that, people have sworn that what they saw was not the same as what somebody else saw, almost like as if they were shapeshifters. And then, you've got Aleister Crowley, the famous occultist and magician, who had a house, Beleskin House, overlooking Loch Ness, and he performed all sorts of rituals and rites to try and summon up demons and supernatural entities. And a lot of researchers privately, not necessarily too much publicly, but a number privately, think that somehow Crowley's activities sort of expanded at least the phenomenon of the Loch Ness Monster, in the sense of it being sort of something supernatural rather than, sort of the simplistic, they're all plesiosaurs or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Aleister Crowley seems to have got around quite a bit, didn't he? He was actually in Rendlesham as well for a while.
Well, he was all over the place, yeah, and he was also he was a really good mountain climber, and all sorts of things. He was a poet, and people just sort of remember him, for his his rites, his rituals, and his orgies, and his altered states, which is not a bad way to live your life, really,
Yeah. It amazes me they've never made a film about him, actually. I think that would be...
that's a good point, actually, yeah.
Yeah, it would actually make quite a good movie, wouldn't it? But,
it would, yeah.
I mean, I don't know...
probably somebody like...
Sorry, go on.
Probably somebody like Johnny Depp would do that good.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right, actually.
Yeah.
But I don't know you feel about Bigfoot and things. I know there's often related to UFO incidents as well, isn't there? UFOs are often seen at the same time, or round about the same time.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Actually, there was a big wave of that in 1973. A friend of mine, Stan Gordon, he wrote a book about 10 years ago now called Silent Invasion, and that book is it's a full-length book all about this wave of Bigfoot and UFO activity in Pennsylvania. And, if you want to read his book, Silent Invasion, it's a really good one. He reads well, a lot of atmosphere. And he demonstrates by the end of the time you've read the book, it's like, wow, yeah, these things are real, but they're not just, like I said earlier, they're just not the equivalent of an African gorilla. There's something way, way beyond that. I don't know what it is, but there's something that really makes them sort of, like I said, this angle of, you're looking at them and you blink your eyes and they've gone.
Yeah, like an interdimensional being even, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think they are.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you.
Yeah, now a lot of people in mainstream cryptozoology don't go with that, and you wouldn't believe the arguments I've had. I found cryptozoology, there's far more sort of infighting in cryptozoology than there is in ufology. I've had a few sort of confrontations. The last one was in 2017 at a conference a few years ago at the Roswell event, and I was disagreeing with...
Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall at some of your events. I bet you've had some fantastic conversations.
Yeah. Well, do you know Greg Bishop?
I've heard the name, yeah.
Oh, well, he's a UFO guy. He's a good friend of mine, and he almost had to pull me off me when I was sort of about to launch myself at somebody who just would not shut up, That was fun, but that was, that was made to change people like that. The audience liked it.
Yeah, so it's a bit of extra entertainment.
But, yeah, I think the main thing is, for all of us, whatever our beliefs are in relation to all this stuff, do your best to do what you can. And I mean, anybody tomorrow could get the answer to Roswell or Rendlesham or Bigfoot or Nessie or whatever. And the good thing is this subject, doesn't require you to have, a degree in this or degree or that. You don't need a degree to paddle around on Loch Ness, better if you've got like a camera, like me, hopefully I've sort of, I've got a a good body of material, which some people like it, some don't, some are in between, and but that's how it goes. But the good thing is, any of us could get the answers. You don't need to be professor this or doctor whatever. I mean, I walked out of school at 16, just before I was done with it, and and it was just before the 6 weeks holiday, and I left about 3 weeks before, and I was kind of like, well, what are you going to do? Come and arrest me?
Yeah.
And when I finished school, for 8 years, I was a forklift driver, a van driver, a shelf stacker, and then I decided to write a book, the first one, while I wrote a covert agenda in between working as a forklift driver. And so anybody, I left school with like 2 CSEs, I think it was, which was CSEs, which I don't know your age, but CSEs were what people had, for school.
Well, it might go back to the GCE days.
Oh, okay.
So before that.
Well, I never got nothing like that. I just quit, and then, as I said, I did a little while on a magazine, but that collapsed, and this was when Thatcher was around. Sorry, I had to use that word, Thatcher.
Yes, all right. I'll let you off.
And I was not a fan. But again, I was a kid, But when I left school, as I said, I wrote covert agenda in between, working as a forklift driver and a shelf stacker. And so anybody, if you've got the wherewithal to do research and investigate and, putting a book together or articles, anyone can do it. And that's what I like about this subject, that, anyone tomorrow could find the answers, and that would be great, it's one of these subjects that, the whole thing, like cryptozoology, ghost hunting, UFOs, that is one of the good things. If you're dedicated, you're prepared to go out into the field, do investigations, you're not frightened to knock on people's doors and say, hey, somebody told me that your grandfather knew something about this case, and they either say go away or they let you in.
That's right, yes.
But if you don't do it, you'll never know. You have to do the work.
Yeah, feet on the ground, that's the way to do it. And also you can, there's so many like supernatural, if you like, or paranormal subjects you can either specialise in or really cover a lot like you do, because I don't think there's anything you don't cover, is there?
Well, I haven't really done much in ghost hunting. I've written a couple of things and a couple of chapters in books over the years, but I'm just not really that interested in ghost hunting. I don't know why. My key one would be cryptozoology, then ufology, and there's quite a bit of paranormal stuff I like. Like, for example, Crowley's work, things like the shadow people, black-eyed children, sort of paranormal stuff like that. So, I write about that quite a lot. I don't really do much at all in relation to politics. It's not really
there's too much of that around anyway. I mean, what's your actual feeling on ghosts? Do you believe in ghosts?
Well, I think it's one of these situations where it might not be just one phenomenon. One could be something that has, survived bodily, the physical body, in the form, of a person, where people say they've seen a family relative, a day after they died, that kind of thing. I also think another big interest of mine is tulpas and thought forms, the idea that the human mind can conjure up things if you focus on it enough. And I think that could relate to some ghost cases, the idea that you focus on the person and then you create like a projected version of the original person, it's sort of tulpas and thought forms. It's an intriguing angle, the idea of focusing to the deepest degree you can to create something in the human mind. That's why, I think people now see things like the Slender Man, which was absolutely created, as an internet piece of fun, online fun and entertainment. But then, you had literally thousands and thousands of kids focusing on the Slender Man and writing stories about it and artwork and all these different things. And then suddenly people start to see it in the real world because so many people are starting to believe in it that it creates almost like a living thing that actually never lived, but you brought it into life just by enough people focusing and quite literally creating it. So I think that could be responsible for some ghost cases, but
yeah.
But I mean, me and my wife, or my ex-wife, I should say, who was when we got married. But we had a weird experience back in 2003, and we had a dog named Charity. She was, the wrinkly dogs, the Shar-Peis, and she died suddenly. She had a fever, and she died about 2 to 3 days after that she got sick. And we had some really weird stuff in the apartment we lived at the time. Like, one of them was like a really overpowering odor of wet dog smell. Now, anybody who's got a dog,
I know
a wet dog smells like. And I'm not kidding, it was as strong as if you'd sort of burnt the toast in the kitchen. It was that's the sort of parallel I'd make, it was that powerful. And we didn't have any more dogs, and we were just sitting in the living room, and it just, and this was like 2 days afterwards. And Dana, that's my ex, she woke up in the middle of the night hearing like the pitter-patter of nails going down the corridor. And Charity would do that. She'd sort of sleep in the living room till in the early hours, and then she'd come down the corridor and then jump on the bed and sleep on our bed with us. And there was others, I won't go through it all, but, I've sort of done enough research in that field as well that makes me believe that, if there is some kind of human soul, I think then clearly it's not just us, but I think the important thing to differentiate between is, the issue of life after death versus mainstream religion. Now, I don't have any time at all for mainstream religion. For me, organised religion, for me, has been created to control people through.
I agree. Yeah.
It's basically put together to control people through fear and guilt. Now, for me, mainstream religion has nothing to do with what happens when you die. And I think, that angle of threatening people and frightening people into doing this or don't do that, you'll go to hell if you do this or you won't go to hell if you don't do that, etc., etc. I think, that has nothing to do with, I think the idea of some guy with a big beard and a flowing cloak and somebody else, playing the harp or whatever, and some other guy sort of got a pen and paper saying, okay, you're going down there, you're going up there. That's ridiculous, But, as I said, that has nothing to do with the mystery of some aspect of your character, if you like, in some way, I think survives. And I think that's why, whether it's animals or people, you find one of the similar trends in a lot of cases when somebody dies. It's like the soul, or whatever you want to call it, hovers around for a few days, and a few weird things happen in the house in that 3 or 4 days, and then it's gone. Most people talk about that. And that's the same with Charity, our dog. Some essence was left behind, and it was there briefly, and then it was gone. Yeah. And I think, why shouldn't it if it happens to us, why shouldn't it happen to every living thing, from a dog down to an ant? Who's to say that every living thing doesn't have a soul, it gets a bit deep, but it could be.
Yeah. I thought your dog story was quite touching, actually, and I think it was kind of like a little message for you that she was still around, it's...
Well, you find that in a lot of cases. It's as if the people, or what's the aspect of them that's still around, I think it's intriguing because it's not like they just sort of wander around for the sake of it. It almost does come across as if they want to say, everything's okay, that kind of thing. Okay, we've all had our pets, and everybody, without being negative, but everybody's pet dies at one point. We all hope later than earlier, kind of exactly the same with us. We want to go later as well. But it's, in a lot of these cases, I think, whether it's animals or people, I think the whole purpose is for the person to see, their relative or their pet, because, the one that's passed on wants to show that everything is okay, it's a sad time, but I'm still here kind of thing. So I think that plays into a lot of it. I don't think it's just, they're just weaving around and walking through the walls for no reason. It's... I think it's with a purpose, really. I
mean, obviously on this show I've had quite a few people on who are actual psychics and mediums and etc., and they're very convinced as to what they're seeing, and I believe that the soul does survive. I'm not a religious person either. I was born into the Church of England, and I was sort of what they call it, made a member of the church and everything, and then I started thinking for myself, and and I just couldn't, it just didn't sort of all tie together for me, so I started thinking about it, but I do still believe that there's a soul, and that we go somewhere else when in fact, I'll tell you this, Nick, my wife, she actually died, but before I knew her, she actually died a couple of times on the way to a hospital because she's got asthma, and apparently she actually remembers seeing the light and everything. And actually the ambulance drivers actually went into the hospital to see her, to tell her about when she actually died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and she was brought back and everything. So she's actually got no fear of death now, because she says she knows that there's something at the end of it, because she was given the choice to come back. It's which is quite interesting.
I don't pretend at all to know what happens to us or where we go, but like I said, I don't think it's so simplistic as what people would say. I think we're looking at something that, if you could figure it out, it would actually be sort of explained with science, possibly, things like heaven and hell, and all these other, cultures around the world have their own versions of heaven and hell. My view is that, ancient people knew far more about that than we do, and I think what they call, or some people call heaven and hell, and different kinds of realms, I think they're probably sort of multiple dimensions, multi-dimensions, and I think ancient man knew something about that, possibly even a lot more than we do, and they understood that there were different planes where your soul would go to. But they viewed it as Hades, as heaven, as hell, etc., etc. But that's more of a simplistic way to explain a dimension versus another dimension. So I think whatever leaves our body is acclimatized to that realm of existence, but it's a very different kind of existence, if you like, than what it appears to be, at least.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it all depends on how you feel about the soul and being in the body and everything, and where it goes when and if you die. And it's the reincarnation connection as well, isn't there? Like you can come back again.
Yeah, and I think it's. The whole thing is sort of difficult to understand, because I think the one thing for me that really stands out, it's like we're not sort of given permission to sort of see the full story. We have to kind of wait, you know, and I think that's what sometimes frustrates people. You know, it's like they're given part of the story, or they're tantalized by seeing their dead husband or whatever, you know, in the bedroom at 3 a.m. But they don't get like a straight answer. It's kind of like enigmatic, you know, the dead person, I mean, you know, sort of stands there just looking, and while you're trying to figure what's the question, or what's the answer, or what are you trying to say. So I think there's that angle as well. But maybe we're not supposed to till we find it ourselves. But I guess for somebody who actually doesn't write about ghosts much, I've probably said quite a lot about it tonight by talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it just boils down to what your beliefs are. None of us will know until we actually get there. So, and some of us will get a big shock when we find out we're not where we thought we were. But
well, let's hope we did less bad than good.
No, I don't believe there's a hell. I mean, I think if there is a hell, we're already living in it. But
nobody goes through life, you know, having done everything perfect. So
no.
It's just not doing.
And we're all going to, whatever you've done, we're all going to go to the same place anyway, whether you're a murderer or a vicar, or whatever. But yeah, we're all going to go to the same place anyway. But you may have a price to pay at the end of it, I don't know. But you mentioned a little bit earlier about, I mean, I don't know how much time you've got still, Nick. I think you've still got a little bit of time. You mentioned about black-eyed children, and that's another thing that fascinates me a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, I don't know. As I say,
well, yeah.
Depends how much time you've got and how much time you.
Oh yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's only 6:50 here, so yeah, and I usually have dinner late, so it's all good. But yeah, the black-eyed children, it's a weird phenomenon that started to surface round about 20 years ago, thereabouts, maybe a little bit less, and they're called the black-eyed children for a reason. You know, they've got these solid black eyes. Kind of imagine like an alien grey, you know, the little the little bodies and the big heads and the black eyes. Well, their eyes look like the eyes of the greys, but they're clearly not greys. Now, there seems to be far more of a paranormal side to this, because I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Paranormal Parasites, which is a study of supernatural creatures that may actually sort of feed upon our life force, like on our energy, rather than literally eating us, you know. And what's interesting is that I've never come across a single case of the black-eyed children where there's a UFO component, which is interesting because the eyes look just like, as I said, like the black-eyed children's eyes. But I'm not aware of a single case where there's a UFO aspect to all of this. But what's interesting is that the usual scenario is that people will get like a knock on the door late at night, sort of 8, 9 o'clock, and people are like, who's that knocking tonight? You know, so they look through the little spio through the door, and they see 2 or 3 young kids, usually wearing a black hoodie with the hood up and pulled down towards your eyebrows, and in most cases, you know, if it's sort of 8, 9 o'clock and there's 3 kids with hoods on, you know, unless it's Halloween, I guess, you know, you probably wouldn't open the door, you know, and you probably wouldn't open the door anyway now, you'd end up infected probably, but for me, you know, when you look at the stories, what you find is a lot of parallels between the black-eyed children of today and old tales of vampires. For example, in most cases, the black-eyed children knock on the door. Now, most people wouldn't open the door to 3 kids who looked about sort of 12 years old, skinny, and the skin's sort of the colour of a bottle of milk, you know, I mean, literally like white. You probably wouldn't let them in, but very often the witnesses have said they actually felt impelled to open the door as if, you know, something was controlling their minds. And they could actually, in one case that I've got, where the guy actually put his hand towards the door to open it, where it was as if his arm wasn't his arm. You know, he was watching it being opened by his arm, so to speak. And but they always ask to be invited in. You know, they don't use those words, but they usually say something like, "We're homeless. Can we come in and you know, have some food?" Or, "We're lost. Can we come and use the telephone and phone our parents?" And so, in other words, they're waiting for the person to say, "Yes, you can come in and use the phone," or, "Yes, we've got a loaf of bread," or whatever. And it's almost, in a weird way, as if they've got sort of rules and regulations that they have to sort of stick to. In the few cases they've got into people's homes, this is where it gets interesting. The people have said that when they let them in, they suddenly started to feel ill. One described it kind of like a diabetic who, let's say, had missed breakfast, lunch and dinner, and was starting to crash, like majorly crashing, that kind of thing. And you know, they started to feel cold and clammy and shaky, didn't feel well, and literally as if their life force was being drained of them, you know. And there's a lot of reports like that. So, you know, that whole phenomenon is an interesting one and a weird one, but it's, you know, I've got reports from the UK, from the US, a couple from South American countries, and I know there's a couple of Italian cases I heard of as well. And you know, what they are, I don't know, but to me, it's more supernatural than it is. As I said, you know, I'm still yet to come across one that has anything to do with UFOs, despite the similarity with the eyes.
Yeah, very startling though, isn't it? It's very much like you said about the vampire thing, about being invited in. It's got very strange connections, and perhaps that's part of where the vampire stories came from as well.
Well, I actually mentioned that in the book, you know, the idea that, you know, everybody thinks of vampires, they think like Christopher Lee, you know, and sort of like hot-looking woman who gets bitten on the neck, you know. But you're right. I mean, it's a weird, fascinating subject, and as you said, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if we're looking at a phenomenon that's actually quite old, but which is perhaps only now occasionally being seen. You know, when now that people are talking about the black-eyed children, maybe their cover is starting to be blown to a degree, and because people are starting to, oh yeah, we know what they are, it's those black-eyed kids, that kind of thing. Up until that point, you know, people might not have sort of seen them up too close, you know, if they're out at night and the heads are down and the hoods are down, you probably wouldn't notice the eyes too much. But yeah, I mean, those parallels are there to see. So, but if you look throughout, you know, folklore, history, mythology, I mean, you usually find there is some sort of genuine origin, you know, for a particular piece of folklore or mythology. And that might be ours now, you know, that sort of perceived, you know, as something, well, these tales of vampires, it's just a, you know, it's just a legend, but maybe it isn't. Maybe, you know, there is kind of like a subtle crossover between the real phenomenon and how back in the 1600s, maybe 1700s, it was sort of, you know, blended into a story, a legend, when there's actually some degree of reality to it.
I mean, we could be back in the interdimensional realms as well, couldn't we?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's an important. Just quickly, that's an important part of it, because the people who do see the black-eyed children and and they literally sort of stand there like a zombie watching. I'm talking about the people standing there like zombies, you know, mind controlled. What they've said is that when the black-eyed children leave, then it's like suddenly the chains come free, so to speak, and the person runs to the door and opens it, and they're already gone. But they've gone in in sort of an impossible, quick time, which again kind of suggests maybe like an interdimensional angle. You know, they literally sort of dematerialize right in front of the door as they leave.
Yeah, scary stuff. I hope they don't knock on my door at any time anyway.
No, you probably wouldn't want them to come in the house, no.
Anyway, I guess sort of we're going to start winding up in a minute, but I can't let you go without talking about your latest book, which is The Martians. Well, unless you've got another one coming out already.
No, I don't. Yeah, well, the new book's, it's called The Martians because it's about the Martians. That was a joke.
Yeah, no, I did get that.
Well, like a lot of people, you know, I've been sort of fascinated over the legends of Mars for years, you know, particularly things like the face on Mars when that first surfaced in the mid to late 1970s. And I think the first time I saw that, I was like, I don't know, 10 or 11, whatever it was, but it was sort of the 70s anyway, mid-70s, late 70s. And when I saw that sort of really caught my attention. Now, you know, I know today, you know, some people say, well, it's just a case of, you know, seeing something like, for example, a dog's face in a cloud, you know. But the more I've dug into this, you know, and the more weirder sort of formations and what seem to be not just the face on Mars. There's actually several head-like, what look like ancient carvings on Mars. So the whole book basically is a study of the possibility that in the distant past, the very distant past, there may have been a Martian civilization, maybe not too dissimilar to ours, with a culture and, you know, lives and families and everything, and something at some point went massively, just totally, you know, destructive. And what it was, who knows? But I think there's enough evidence to suggest that Mars was once like a vibrant world. And so that's the theme of the book. I guess it's kind of like, you know, the whole book is kind of like the final stages of, like, for example, Planet of the Apes, you know, when Charlton Heston's character, Taylor, comes across this, you know, sort of wrecked Statue of Liberty. It's kind of like that, you know, a world where the truth has been lost and the legends, dominate things, and there's these sort of, you know, this area called the Forbidden Zone in the movie, because there was an ancient nuclear war. And so the theme of the book is kind of similar to that. And I mentioned that, the movie and the parallels in the book, but it's kind of like that, you know, looking at the possibility of this ancient, highly advanced culture where something went terribly wrong, and it's basically me presenting the data that I think is strong enough to demonstrate that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, there are even theories that we are the ancient Martians, aren't there? That way back in time that we came to Earth from Mars.
Yeah, that's and there's also a sort of a parallel to that as well. The late Mac Tonis, who wrote a book on Mars as well, he had an interesting theory that before we existed, our civilizations, you know, way back to the Egyptians and beyond that, he wondered if there could have been an ancient human civilization, you know, maybe going back 50,000 years ago that we know nothing about, but they, you know, they were born on Earth, they were humans, but they travelled to Mars, and then that maybe they had, you know, they went to Mars in the same way that we went to the moon, and they had a world war, you know, destroyed themselves. So, you know, maybe the face on Mars looks like a human face because ancient humans went to Mars and built it. You know, maybe there aren't any Martians. In other words, maybe it was actually us who went to Mars, which is like another sort of layer of the puzzle. So
yeah, sure.
So there's so much weirdness surrounding Mars, and you look at, say, for example, Saturn or Jupiter. Most people don't sort of think much of that, but for some reason, a lot of people around the world kind of resonate with Mars. It's almost as if we have almost like a subconscious affinity to Mars, and as if we had some sort of connection with it. But it's like, that when you have a dream and then when you wake up, it kind of fades away. It's kind of like that, where we know something about Mars, or there's a connection, but we're not entirely sure what it actually is.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that touches me is the Holt's Planet Suite, Mars, the Bringer of War. It's an amazing piece of music, and it's probably one of the few classical pieces that I actually sort of like and appreciate. And it's an amazing piece of music. But anyway, Nick, it's been fantastic. I'll put a link to your new book on the Paranormal Dimensions page, as I will for all your books, and links for everything. Now, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, you've obviously got websites and things, or email addresses, or...
Yeah, I've got a blog titled World of Whatever, so if you just Google Nick Redfern World of Whatever, it'll take you directly to my blog. You can reach me at Facebook. There's a bunch of Nick Redferns, but you'll see me, either the second or the third one down or something like that.
I can't believe there's more than one.
Oh yeah, there's lots. There's like in the 20, 30, 40, I think, something like that. I was surprised, actually. Yeah. But actually there's two other writers named Nick Redfern, which gets really confusing as well. There's one guy who he writes reviews for movies and things like that.
Oh right. And, so he
does like history of
how many
movies.
times do you get mistaken for him? I wonder. Is that the same guy?
I'm sure that happens occasionally, probably. Poor guy.
Anyway, Nick, it's been fantastic having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you'll come back on again, perhaps next year, when you've got another couple of books out.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. And I don't have anything coming out this side of the year, but I will have one. The next one will probably be about maybe March or April, and that'll be like an A to Z type book on time travel.
Oh, that sounds good. Oh, right. Well, I'll book you in for spring then, sometime.
Right.
But anyway, Nick, thanks again for coming on. It's been fantastic, and really enjoyed talking to you. And I hope everything goes well over there in the States. Look after yourself in all this and keep yourself out of trouble.
Yeah. All right, well, cheers, mate, and thanks again for having me on, and give me a shout, if there's any breaking story you want me to comment on, give me a shout or whatever.
Yeah, I'm always pleased to, you always interest me when you're on Ancient Aliens, etc., and it's always good to see you, and you're one of the most appreciated...
Well, I ain't done that for a long time. I haven't done that for a long time.
I think it's, I hope you'll get back on there again, but I think you're one of the most appreciated people in the paranormal business. And,
Oh, well, thanks. I mean, I try to tell it as I see it, and, I believe in just telling it as I see it. And if people like it, that's fine. And if they don't, well, that's how it goes, and I think you should just, say what you think, do your own thing, and get the data out there that you've got, and don't worry about what other people think about it,
That's exactly the way it should be.
Have thick skin, have thick skin and debate this and debate that, because that's the best way, really, to get the answers, is not just to share cool campfire stories. The best way to do it is just to, sort of hard work, looking for, solid information, and that, hopefully, doing that, we'll solve some of these cases. And I mean, like I said, maybe somebody will solve Rendlesham in time for Christmas.
Well, we'll wait and see. Perhaps the next time you come on, perhaps we can have a chat about that and see what transpired at the end of this year. But
oh yeah, there's going to be bound to be a bunch of stuff going on for the 40th anniversary. I mean, there has to be. There's got to be.
Well, as I say, I'm hoping to get Chuck back on, Colonel Holt back on again at the end of the year, so I'll keep you in touch with that. Hey,
all right, sir.
Anyway, cheers, Nick. Thanks a lot.
All right,
yeah, cheers, mate. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right,
yeah,
see you
cheers,
later.
Bye. Okay, well, you've been listening to Nick Redfern on Paranormal Dimensions on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm David Young. Thank you for listening, and take care, and hope you'll join me again next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Paranormal Dimensions is as bright and powerful as our celestial star, the sun. And although it's expending thousands of pounds of energy every minute of the day, have no fear. There's plenty left.
Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.